Everybody. I'm really privileged to be part of this very esteemed group of evangelists and leaders in post-quantum space. So things are exceptionally dynamic in the space, as everybody knows. There's a bunch of new advisories and procurement policy documents issued. We see a lot of large vendors coming up with more committed roadmaps, to put it that way, to updating their software with post-quantum standards over the next year, 2 years, 3 years. It varies from vendor to vendor. It's probably going to be done over a long period of time. There's also, I think, relatively silently an silent effort to come up with new versions of their hardware products in case of hardware vendors in the networking space, for instance, that will be post-quantum from the ground up, including the root of trust, which is still a bit of a taboo topic in the industry. We see a lot of that. On the other hand, one of the biggest shifts that I've noticed and that changes quite a bit and is the very fundamental assumption of what we're doing is that are the timelines to the cryptographically relevant quantum computer. I mean, that drives a lot of the initiatives. Are they very far out or are they changing? And what we've seen in the past 4 months or so is that there is an significant and real opportunity for these timelines to shift, which is the core assumption of quantum safe migration timelines. And in particular, because there's a couple of very interesting things that have happened. One of them, I can speak from the trapped ion perspective. There's a much more aggressive timeline to scale. Sorry, not sure what's going on. I've been having a flu for a while, so I have this cough. There's a much more aggressive timeline towards hitting 1 and 2 million high fidelity qubits. So we're not talking 10 to 15 years anymore. These timelines with several recent acquisitions in IonQ's example, these timelines have shrunk within up to 2030. So 2028, 29, 2030 that we're going to hit and exceed 1 million high fidelity qubits. And if we know Google's research from last year, if you remember that, there's been in a way a proof that to run Shor's algorithm, you do not need, as people believe, 20 million qubits and so on, that in fact you can do it with up to 1 million of high fidelity qubits. So this shifts some of these fundamental assumptions we have, main need of practitioners and us in the field who work to potentially correct some of the trajectories for quantum safe migration, potentially speed up, prioritize better, go faster with some of the implementations of quantum resilient technology. So I can see that, for instance, a lot of interest on the board level that I can testify to over the past couple of months. So very large institutions, financials, energy companies, and broader, where they want C-level to debrief them on the timeline and what they're doing to prepare. So I think that's very, very good news. And then that trickles down, that pressure trickles down into the technology space, the vendor space, and that goes into standard space then, that try to speed up some of these projects and get the solutions that we need. And there's all kinds of solutions needed. We have people on the call here mention, TLS implementations and different types of standardizations of post-quantum cryptography that are needed, both on PQC side as well as on QKD side, which has been relatively slow. All of this needs to be moving as quickly as possible so that we are not caught that we're not caught by surprise earlier than we thought we would be.
Concerns. How do you think those concerns will be addressed? Do you think a new generation of hardware components that are PQC enabled will emerge, or it will be the same revised components in the next several years?
Not sure if there is a question for me. Not sure if anybody
Right,
else
it's a
wants
question
to.
for you. Yeah.
Yeah, so it kind of varies from depending on where you go for the answers in a very big hardware industry. So you have chip manufacturers, component manufacturers, and you have complete hardware solution manufacturers, and each has a slightly different, I guess, strategy to it. My belief from everything I know that for the most part, it's going to be a mix of two. One is gradual software patching of things that can be patched on the existing hardware, and then it's going to be rip and replace of a lot of components that where root of trust cannot be addressed. Nobody wants to run a data center where all of the network services are PQC enabled or post quantum, but you cannot trust the boxes themselves, meaning that the root of trust is the old classical public key cryptography, meaning that anybody walking into data centers could potentially load an operating system with a forged digital signature. So nobody wants to operate like that. So, and in most instances, this is not fixed with a software patch. You need a new generation of hardware. Not only because maybe the current generation of hardware would have performance impacts with PQC, which is possible in some environments, especially on performance limited chipsets, embedded industry, IoT industry, automotive industry, and so on. They will be replacing just about everything. But it's more than, I think, from what I know from some of the roadmaps, is that a lot of vendors are planning for that pure PQC product down the road, where it's going to be from the ground up, including with the public key burnt into the hardware. Everything will be PQC and properly sized to run PQC, not just current generation, because there's many fallacies in this space that or misbeliefs, or what people heard a couple of years ago may not hold true any longer. One of those is, well, we had 30, 40 years of very steady, Diffie-Hellman and RSA and ECC lifespan, and we just upgrade to the current version of PQC, which may take us 10 years, for instance, for a company, and then we're good for another 40 years. That probably is going to be one of the fallacies of the situation. So people may need to upgrade multiple times as new standards emerge and new PQC algorithms emerge. So this is the reality of what we're dealing with. So sizing the hardware and components properly for these potential changes in the next 5 to 10 years is going to be very important for the hardware industry.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I agree with you. I see a lot of announcements about APIs to PQC to enable all the components to operate in some sort of simulated compliance. Upon review, they don't appear very strong, but that inevitably will be part of the story for the next 2 years. Well, thank you, Brian. What do you think, Simon?
Yes, very much in line with what's been said. We do not know what the state labs are working on, obviously, and we do not know their roadmaps or their timelines. We just know there's a lot of investment. This is one of the most, in a way, awkward paradoxes, I think, in the tech industry today. I don't know if I can call it that way. Is that we're funneling so much money into quantum compute because of what we call in the industry happy quantum, which is all the good stuff. And that money, is accelerating roadmaps, as I said, or multiple vendors in multiple technologies, getting us quicker to all these great breakthroughs in chemistry, biology, and advanced materials, you name it. At the same time, this is getting us much quicker to the cryptographically relevant quantum computer, which in a way is forcing us to spend a lot of money very fast to protect ourselves. And another interesting paradoxical thing about the quantum threat is that it's very asymmetrical. You see, to tap data to eavesdrop is relatively inexpensive or almost completely free if you think about it. If you look at, you can buy a petabyte of storage at online storage for, I don't know, $20,000 a month. You can tap a lot of data with that, depending on what data you want and where you want. Then you have the tooling, very sophisticated tooling now, that uses machine learning to identify the traffic and sift through that traffic to find the traffic you're interested in and so on. So it's not as complicated as people thought it was, or the way it used to be 15, 20 years ago. It was super complicated to do that. It's relatively inexpensive now. But so to tap a company, help yourself for 20,000 a month, tap petabytes of data. To protect yourself against that tapping, it's a whole different story, right? So companies have to go through multi-year, huge IT projects from step 1 to step 10 to protect all of the different pieces of their infrastructure. So it's a very, I don't know, maybe not to the level of absurd, but the paradox is just amazing of that asymmetry. Just maybe one of my thoughts for the end.
You see in the United Kingdom, and you could talk about other countries as well, since you are international.
Yes, United Kingdom is probably very similar to most of the European countries, or there's a lot of similarities in how they go around policy, how they go around public funding. Sorry, public funding of some of these projects, and they're also trying to work on the quantum physics or quantum networks a little bit more behind EuroQCI project that we've seen in Europe that could span a couple of very large networks, and we've built some that are bigger than 1,700 kilometers in some countries. And I'm really looking forward to the phase 2 of that, by the way, which is the cross-country connectivity. So it's a one large network. But you see differences there where some of the Europeans and even UK, they're focused on the current technologies. And in the US, you have had funding for, in particular, quantum physics, quantum networks, for the sort of a next gen or sort of a futuristic lower TRL technology such as entangled QKD. So everybody's thinking of that. So the perception is very different on this. In the same time, if you look at the adoption of these technologies in the enterprise, it's almost reverse, where you have, US government funding entangled QKD, European government funding prepare and measure current generation of telecom-ready QKD. You have American enterprise multinationals and large financials adopting the current QKD that's prepare and measure that's built in Europe. They're deploying it because they want defense in depth, and they don't want to run very large companies. These are trillion-dollar companies on a single set of mathematical assumptions. They don't do stuff like that, so they like to hedge their risk. So they like to layer technologies and spread the risk and so on. So it's a very different dynamic on two sides. European companies tend to be more wait for the regulator to force me to do something type of thing, or work with, as the letter of law comes out, we're going to do something about it. So I'm very much looking forward to, and one interesting thing is what we've heard for the very top engineers and principal level people in very large multinational companies. They absolutely are asking, just like people on the call here on the panel, they're asking for a larger investment from the government in general in quantum safe, and long term they're asking for larger investment in quantum physics-based security, because the overall belief is that it's going to be harder and harder to engineer new mathematical standard as quickly as needed, and as efficiently as needed, and elegantly, to be easily and quickly deployed everywhere. So they're also looking for the governments to ensure there are long-term solutions being funded today, because it takes a long time to, research and engineer and industrialize all of these solutions.
Thank you. Fascinating.